Hi everyone, it's Hollywood King, and I'm here to share Not a Dream Chapter 3. So let's get started. Chapter 3, An Angel and His Hunter. Helen awoke the next morning, leaning against the frame of her window. She was facing the huge bed, her face against the window and her head against the frame. Her left hand lay curled up in her lap, and her right was palm up on the floor. Her left leg was asleep because it was curled under her, and her right leg was stretched across the length of the window. The pain in her body wasn't what had awoken her, however. It was a loud noise outside her door. She could hear things clearly breaking. One man was yelling at someone. It was hard to tell who. Her interest for this fight waned and disappeared, for she went back to staring out the window, not even caring to move her tingling foot. That was when her door splintered and fell to the floor as two men flew through the opening. "Give it back!" A man with blonde hair and thin, long fingers cried as he reached for a picture. His voice was oddly distorted. It sounded almost inhuman. She was having trouble placing the man's voice. "Come and get it, little man," the other man said, holding the picture out of his reach. She recognized the ragged sound he had to his voice as one of the men in the kitchen her first night there. Helen sighed. She wanted to be left alone. It was her room, after all, prison or not. She stood, a little wobbly at first, considering her sleeping leg, and approached the men. "Honestly, this is a girl's room. What if I was changing and you barged in?" she said as she grabbed the picture. "Here." She handed it to the man on top of the pile. "Thank you," the man said, his voice changing back to normal and his face instantly warming. She now recognized him as the angel that had grabbed her just as she was fainting. "I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten it back." He left the room completely content. Helen watched the second man carefully as he stood up. He was tall and fat, with a stomach that poked out from his waist as though it belonged to the jolly old Saint Nick. This guy was not a fat man from the North Pole, though. No, he was from a different kind of human. His eyes were red from smoking and drinking all his life. He regarded her with such hunger that made her nervous. So there really was something to fear in this house, after all. "Maybe next time you will be changing," he said as he left the room. "You have a right to be afraid of him. He will take advantage of you the next chance he gets," the voice hissed at her. Helen watched him go, with every fiber in her body telling her that she had better stay where she was unless she wanted to be caught somewhere near him, or worse, by him. She stepped back from the door again, afraid for her life. "What the heck happened here?" Greg walked through the door. Oh, great, it was him again. He was the worst one of them all. Always coming into her room with the thought fancied him. What did he want? "To touch your skin," the voice mocked her. "Two men fell through my door," Helen replied, keeping her voice uninterested, her whole body on guard. "Well, dang it all, it looks like we'll have to wait till later to fix it," Greg said, scratching the back of his head. "Is there any way you could fix it now?" she asked him, her eyes searching his for an answer. She wasn't near him. In fact, she was standing 2 feet from him. She didn't want to touch him, for if she did, there was no telling what he could do. At least, if she really wanted to get away, she could jump out the window. "I'll be right back." Greg left and reappeared with Eric on his heels. "What happened here?" Eric asked, looking at the damage. "Two words, Damien and Alan," Greg answered, shaking his head in shame. "In any case, Helen here wanted to see if her door could get fixed now, and I really don't want to wake up Troy, but she looks so worried." I'll make those clowns wake him up." Eric turned from the door. "In the meantime, cover up the windows and clean things up a little. He likes a clean environment." "Don't worry, it'll be ready for him in no time." Greg turned and grabbed the string of the shades. He hummed to himself as he worked, sometimes whispering nonsense words to himself. "What are you doing?" Helen reached for him, but recoiled, realizing she almost grabbed the man's wrist. That wouldn't have been any good. "Troy can't be in the sunlight. If you want your door fixed, the windows have to be covered. He won't like being woken up in the middle of the afternoon." "That's what I'm doing," was his reply as he continued to cover the windows. It wasn't an easy task, but he still managed to get through it quickly. The next couple of minutes were intriguing, for Greg was zipping around the room, cleaning up dirty dishes and sweeping the splinters off the floor. He was done just in time for a very irritated man to come in through the door. Helen stood in the place she had stayed throughout the entire cleaning fiasco. She looked at the man while holding onto her bedpost. It was the farthest place away from the door and the window. He had blood-hungry eyes like a vampire's when they don't have enough blood. But that wasn't possible. She recognized his eyes from the night she had first come to be trapped in her room. His skin was such a pasty color that it wasn't a mystery to her as to why he couldn't stand the sunlight. And his hair was a dark brown, almost black color. She was enticed by his features. It wasn't explainable until Greg grabbed her arm. She squeaked when he did and pulled him away. Sorry, he pulled his hands away. I just wanted to make sure you weren't watching him too closely. He does fine enough around us, but we tend to forget his appearance attracts his prey. He would feel badly if he killed you and he was still half awake. The man was simply an amazing creature. With each movement he made, he seemed to move with a grace and speed that was impossible to map. He quickly measured the length and width of the door. Then he went out the open doorway, and came back 1 minute later with a brand new door. He fitted it into place and then quickly put it on its hinges. He finished by placing the doorknob into place. The entire project had taken him 5 minutes at the most. Helen just looked at the strange man, confused. There, the door is done. I'm going back to my quarters, the man said tiredly, no doubt by the name of Troy. If I must come back a second time in the daylight, I will hold Alan personally responsible. He then smoothly swept himself away and out the door in one swift movement. Helen found herself staring again. Why does that happen? It's because he's a vampire, Eric said, adjusting his glasses as he stared at Troy's handiwork. What? Helen half laughed the words. That's not possible. Sure it is. Eric turned towards the girl. It's no more possible than my being a demon or Greg here being a shapeshifter. Honestly, no one can be that closed-minded. Eric walked out the room with a book under his arm. Don't worry, nothing will happen to you. Troy really wouldn't hurt you, Greg said reassuringly, but his eyes darted around the room. You better watch your back, little girlie, the voice said with a chuckle. Why would Alan be held responsible if Troy had to be awoken again? Helen asked, ignoring the voice masterfully. Her blood was cold. She still couldn't shake the feeling that Alan wouldn't hurt her. She didn't get scared when she was thinking of Troy, even though she felt as though she should be afraid of a vampire. It's because Alan is a troublemaker, Greg explained, watching Helen carefully. Why pick on Damien, then? Helen was just slightly curious and mostly bored. As much as she felt she needed distance between her and Greg, she was also lonely and knew he would talk with her in just a normal conversation. Alan is an angel hunter. And Damien is an angel, Greg explained lightly. Helen swallowed, her panic away. Calm down, Helen. You'll get yourself through this. You know you can, she thought calmly. Why would there be a need for an angel hunter? Are there any more surprises I should be prepared for? Well, not really. Greg thought a moment. Damien is the only angel that should ever be hunted. He really is nothing more than a gigantic flirt with any woman he meets. Plus, he's a big supporter of Troy, which merits enough evil for one person. Why is Troy so bad? Helen didn't like talking about the vampire, but the way Greg spoke of him made her feel a little uneasy about her situation. I can't say. It's not important. Greg began to tidy up Helen's room in order to sidestep the situation. It looks like the draperies can come down now. Greg, Helen said tiredly. Yes? Greg looked over at the girl. Please leave, she said, turning towards the window. Okay. He nodded in agreement and turned away from the only window in the room. You always tell me to keep my mouth shut. But do I listen? No, he murmured to himself as he walked out the door. When the door closed silently behind him, Helen sunk to the floor, listening to her breathing. She thought of her worthless father and wondered how well he would have handled the situation. Probably would have let them kill him right away so he could be put out of his misery. Then she thought of her mother and wondered the same for her. The result would be the opposite. She would beg for her life and try to bargain with them. Thinking of her parents made her wonder how she fit in with their twisted view of the world. For neither of those plans appealed to Helen. Her plan was to find an opportunity to get herself out of the place she lived. All she needed was the trust of the other 3 housemates in that huge mansion. It was easier said than done, because Alan was out and about, which was terrifying, and quite frankly had something unscrewed inside him if he was messing with a crazy angel. Troy was a vampire and would easily overpower her. That meant to either steer clear of him or try to make friends and get him on her side. Either choice would be dangerous. She doubted a vampire appreciated betrayal. Then, of course, an angel, who by Greg's tone of voice was that the man wasn't very angelic. After all this thinking, Helen decided to take a chance and go after the one that was the most challenging, but the most intriguing. It wasn't as if she would be blamed for waking him anyway. She was going to find herself a vampire. If the others had a problem with her wandering around in the mansion, then they should have kept a lock on the door. Alrighty, that's the end of chapter 3. If you guys have any questions of the book, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And also, I will leave in the description below websites to where you can buy the book if you would like to have it for yourself. And I guess I will see you guys next time. Bye.